all boils down to is I don't like being told what to do. I mean, honestly, that's what it boils down to is I don't like being told what to do, and I don't think other people should be told what to do either. And the whole system is built upon telling people what to do, so I can't really go along with that. Strong leadership is not something which I appreciate very much, actually. I'm not a fan of strong leadership. I'm not a fan of people who have empty promises, who can't ever possibly substantiate any of the things that they actually say. Like, building a wall is not actually financially or economically viable for a world power, much less a, don't think Mexico counts as third world, but it's not really second or first. Anyway, it doesn't have the financial prowess to build a wall, but we'll just ignore that for now. No, but I just get kind of sick of the whole narrative that, we need this strong leadership. And well, the reason I'm venting about the FBI is because something just recently happened here where it appears, right? It appears that the FBI may have been paying off some guys at Carnegie Mellon University, well known for its technological prowess, to get into the TOR network. Oh boy. This is Digital Drive right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240, and we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com as well. Not to say that we're not always here on AM 1240, but sometimes you can't pick us up so great. We know that. So go to hotnewstalkradio.com and you can listen to us streaming live that way. Now, the headphones were adjusted for someone with a very small head when I came in, so I know that Eric Judd was just on, and he had a really good guest. Now, if you want to watch his interview, you can. Go to Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube, and you can watch that live interview, which he did here on Hot News Talk Radio, and you can see his great interview with a guy from Preparedness 5, Duke from P5 came in to talk about preparedness, and in a really good practical way too, I think. And it worked out so well because it wasn't just like, well, the first thing you got to do is buy 14 guns, and then you got to be sure that you have an escape plan and all this different stuff. And it was much more practical than that. And that's why I really, really like the interview that was done there. I think the method which is used at P5 is much better than some of the other things I've seen, especially on the internet, where people are just like, I built a fort in my backyard, and it's actually my house is actually used to be a prison, but I've retrofitted it to be a luxury condo. And it just so happens that if the world collapse, I have this nice luxury condo that's in a maximum security prison. And you got the guys who buy nuclear silos to live in too. I actually really want to live in a nuclear silo. Fun story. One of the world's biggest LSD labs ever was in a nuclear silo. I watched a documentary on that the other day, and man, did they party. Because it was a really nice setup they had. Not just the lab. The lab was a nice setup too. But no, like the living quarters were amazingly well set up. But I digress. No, the FBI might have been kind of been asking for some identities of people who are on the TOR network. According to Ars Technica, the head of the TOR project has accused the FBI of paying Carnegie Mellon computer security researchers at least $1 million to de-anonymize TOR users and reveal their IP addresses as part of a large criminal investigation. Now, neither Carnegie Mellon officials nor the FBI immediately responded to any request for comment from Ars Technica. If this turns out to be true, it would represent a highly unusual collaboration between computer security researchers and the federal authorities, because they tend to have a rather strained relationship, to say the least. Computer researchers tend to not like feds unless they're getting paid by them, and the feds tend to not like security researchers because they're always messing up government efforts to obfuscate information. So it's kind of a strained relationship going on there, unless there's mutual gain for the researchers being money, gain for the FBI being IP addresses. Now, the one thing I am disappointed by in this is that the researchers at Carnegie Mellon would be willing to give up this information, because that seems like sort of a jettisoning of morals there, ethics, but whatever. Ed DeSautel's, I believe, the spokesman for Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, did not deny the accusations, but he said to Wired Magazine this: "I'd like to see the substantiation for their claim," adding, "I'm not aware of any payment." Now, note that he's only denying payment. This could be that the FBI is paying an individual for this, maybe, but we don't know. I mean, to be fair to the guys at Carnegie Mellon, maybe they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, right? One of the IP addresses revealed belongs to, allegedly, of course, Brian Farrell, who's an alleged Silk Road 2 lieutenant who is due to stand trial in federal court in Seattle later on this month, actually. A new filing in Farrell's case, which was first reported on Wednesday by Vice Motherboard, says that university-based research institute aided government efforts to unmask Farrell. And with this information coming out about Carnegie Mellon, it seems like a rather informed guess to say that it would be Carnegie Mellon that was the university-based research institute which unmasked Farrell. Now, we should probably give you a little bit of background. But first, I should tell you that this show is brought to you by Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. We can get cash, get top dollar for your gold and silver from Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. That's 5301 Brainerd Road. That's cash from Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds over there on 5301 Brainerd Road. If you have any junk jewelry that you want to give in, gold necklaces or bracelets, or you might not think is worth anything, but Rick might appraise them and give you cash on the spot at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds at 5301 Brainerd Road. Get cash. And we say cash 3 times to emphasize that you will probably be getting some nice greenbacks, if you know what I'm saying. Now, here's the thing about TOR. It was actually originally created by the Navy, which is kind of funny, actually, considering the anti-government stance, which so many people on TOR have. But yeah, actually, that is true. The TOR network was originally put together by researchers for Navy intelligence. Now, you might not think of the Navy as having a whole lot to do with, well, I wouldn't say intelligence, because I'm sure they're very smart people there. But no, you might be surprised to discover that the Navy actually deals quite a lot with technology and technical surveillance and all sorts of other things the Navy deals with, things that we don't know about. But think about the history of the Navy. The Navy uses radar quite a lot, and the Navy had to build upon that for better guiding system. GPS came out of the Navy, perhaps all sorts of different research technologies and all sorts of different geolocation technologies, and indeed computer security technologies came out of the Navy, surprisingly enough. Well, surprising to some, I suppose. It surprised me when I read that, but there you go. Yeah, the Navy actually helped to develop the TOR network. Now, TOR stands for the Onion Router, which is one of those acronyms where the word "the" actually gets its own letter in the acronym, which is actually kind of rare because they usually don't use "the." But in this case, it's the Onion Router. Why, you might be asking, is it called the Onion Router? Well, it's kind of like Shrek. It's an onion, like layers. And when it's layered, it's sort of layers of IPs which you're bounced through, which presumably make you harder to find. So let's say I want to go to Google. Okay, I can just go to my computer, type in www.google.com and hit enter in the URL bar, and it takes me to google.com. Simple as that. Well, actually what's happening when I go to google.com is I'm being directed through DNS to an IP address, which my web browser is interpreting the HTML of to display the graphic images which I see on google.com. That's how the web works, actually. That's what Mark Andreessen envisioned. Not Mark Andreessen, pardon me. That's what Tim Berners-Lee envisioned when he invented the World Wide Web. And Mark Andreessen invented the first web browser, Mosaic, back in the 94, I think is when that happened. But anyway, I digress. So what happens there is one IP connects to another IP. Simple as that. Your IP at your house connects to the IP over at Google, one of the billions of IPs potentially over at Google, and you interpret the information. It's pretty simple stuff, although it's really complicated, but in theory, it's pretty simple, actually. Well, what TOR does is it puts a lot of layers between you and the end destination. Think of it as taking a bunch of different detours. Now, just like taking a bunch of detours on your road trip to California, taking a bunch of detours on your computer to get to google.com slows down your connection pretty significantly. So just like going to California and you take a bunch of pit stops, it's going to slow down your drive time to your end destination. Same thing with TOR. Now, that's a trade-off because you get added privacy, but you have slower speed. So it is a trade-off. And some days it's faster than others, depending on which node you're connecting to. And by the way, the node is what it's called. When you're bouncing off of one of the IPs, it's called a node. You can actually run a node at your house if you want to. I thought it'd be really fun to run one here at Hot News Talk Radio, but I might get in trouble. So I'll run that with the higher-ups here first, and I probably need to put a server here to do that too. They're actually, funnily enough, there actually is one at a public library in Massachusetts, which is kind of fun, or New Hampshire, I should say, which is kind of funny too, but I digress yet again. So that technically would obfuscate your identity when you're accessing different stuff on the internet. Now, the fun thing about this too is that it's not just for hiding your connection to regular mainstream websites. Now we get to the fun stuff, which is called the deep web. Now, deep web is, okay, Some people like to call it darknet or dark web or whatever in an effort to make it sound a little bit scarier than it actually is. It's really not that frightening, but whatevs. No, it's not like the deep web in and of itself is a little bit weird. It's very Web 1.0 when you're accessing it. It feels very AOL because there's not a whole lot of JavaScript. There's not like any Flash videos are like non-existent almost. There are images, but they're always like low-res JPEGs and all these sorts of things. And it's not the internet that we are used to unless you last used the internet sometime in the late 90s and you accessed AOL Kids. You get what I'm saying? So it's not the same internet that we are used to. Still, though, it's functional. It does work, but the deep web carries a lot of different information. Some say that the deep web is actually bigger than the clear net. I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I've read before. But the deep web carries a lot of different websites which can't normally be accessed by your regular old internet connection. You have to be accessing it through Tor to access the .onion websites. That's where a lot of the different drug narcotic selling websites were. Notably, there were some in Germany, actually, which sold drugs through vacuum sealed packages in the European Union, and you would just buy them with euros, or actually you buy them with Bitcoin. Bitcoin plays a big part in the deep web, by the way. It's pretty much the currency of choice because it doesn't matter where you are. You can spend Bitcoin and then transfer it into your native currency. So, or not, it's up to you. So Bitcoin's a great currency for deep web dealings and just online purchasing in general. I'd say Bitcoin is great for that, but whatever. So all of that, putting that out there, now we pretty much understand how the deep web works. If you remember the Silk Road, that was a deep web website which sold drugs on the internet. And I don't have a problem with that, honestly. I think you should do what you want to do. You know, I don't think taking drugs is great, but it's your body. Hey, do what you want to do. If you want to get jacked up on meth or whatever, who am I to say that that's wrong? But there are other examples too. I mean, there could be stuff on there like kratom that's not going to kill you and actually might have medical benefits. But then again, you can buy that on the regular web now anyway, because it's not actually illegal. Just like you can buy mushroom spores. That it's actually not illegal to buy mushroom spores, but it's illegal to cultivate these particular mushrooms. Weird stuff. Drug laws are odd. I don't do drugs, but I read into drug laws a lot for some reason. It's interesting, the minutiae of all these different laws that really just make no sense, especially Georgia laws and Tennessee laws, the discrepancies between them. But remember what I said about digressing? Yeah, I'm doing that again, aren't I? No, but it's interesting how the whole system plays out because there's sort of a love-hate relationship between the government and Tor, because on the one hand, Tor is a great resource for busting people, but on the other hand, it offers some semblance of anonymity to talk bad about the feds, which probably any FBI agent would tell you you have a right to do, to talk bad about the feds, right? I mean, you can do that. You can't like slander anyone. You can't be libelous legally, but you could say like, I don't like the FBI, right? I mean, you can say that. I just said it and it's true. I don't. You could say that on the web too. And probably any FBI agent would tell you that you have a right to do that. But on the deep web, there are a lot more extreme viewpoints. Some hyper-nationalistic, some are very communistic, some are very anarchistic. You get all sorts of different viewpoints on deep web, just like you do on the ClearNet. ClearNet, by the way, is your regular www.com addresses, .orgs, .nets, .edus, what have you. Well, Carnegie Mellon, apparently, this is all alleged, but the FBI might have, according to some resources, might have been paid. Some people at Carnegie Mellon may have been paid by the FBI to find out the identities of some of these people on Tor. Now, like this article from Ars Technica points out, an article from Vice Motherboard said that a university-based research institute aided government efforts to unmask Farrell, who was they call him a lieutenant, who worked on Silk Road 2. Silk Road 2 was, of course, you guessed it, successor to Silk Road, which sold narcotics online on the deep web. Now, again, I'm not passing judgment on that in and of itself, like the buying of narcotics on the deep web. I'm not really saying anything about that at this point. That just is how it was. But it's interesting the way the FBI treated it very seriously. The DEA especially treated it like it was the worst thing to ever happen, which I thought was kind of funny because most of the drugs that were being sold were actually being sold by like local people. So it was, I don't know, it was weird. Silk Road was really weird while it lasted. Now, there's still resources on deep web to buy narcotics, by the way. Taking down Silk Road didn't really help anything because if anything, now they're better at it and there are more of them. So taking down Silk Road was possibly mistake, actually. Maybe it would have been better to just bust people who used it, but I'm not the FBI, so whatever. Ars Technica reported back in January of this year that a Homeland Security search warrant affidavit stated that from January to July 2014, a, quote, source of information, end quote, provided law enforcement with particular IP addresses which had accessed the vendor side of Silk Road 2. Now, that is interesting because, again, TOR is supposed to mask that. And the only way to access Silk Road 2 was through TOR. So how are they getting the IP addresses? Well, there's no such thing as complete security, right? We know that. And you'd be naive to think that, well, I use TOR, I can't be tracked. It doesn't work that way. Never has, never will. You can always be tracked. Even in the physical world or on the net, you can always be tracked. An expert tracker can find you even if you've walked through a creek because you read that that'll get dogs off of your trail or what have you. And same goes for the internet. Even if you go through many layers, an expert can still find out where you are, who you are, what you do, what your occupation is, all sorts of different things. Basically, accessing the internet ever is just basically sending out an invitation for people to find you. It's just how the net works. And it's not really a good thing or a bad thing. It just is how it works. It's based on identity in a lot of different cases. And on TOR, it's based on masking your identity, but still a unique identifier is being put out there in the form of your IP. It's just as being bounced off of different nodes. So in the end, your IP is still going out there. It's just harder to get to. It's really a complicated situation. But there's a blog post which was published on Wednesday, and the TOR project director, Roger Dingledine, said that there is no indication yet that federal authorities had a warrant or any institutional oversight by Carnegie Mellon's Institutional Review Board. Dingledine did not immediately respond to any requests for comments either, but if this does turn out to be true, this could be rather disastrous because it could turn out that the FBI actively is trying to take down TOR, essentially. Now, he said this: we think that it's unlikely they could have gotten a valid warrant for CMU's, that's Carnegie Mellon University's, attack as conducted, since it was not narrowly tailored to target criminals or criminal activity, but instead appears to have indiscriminately targeted many users at once. Such action is a violation of our trust and basic guidelines for ethic research. We strongly support independent research on our software and network, but this attack crosses the crucial line between research and endangering innocent users. And remember what I was saying earlier about ethics. That's why it seems a little bit unlikely that this might have happened intentionally from a tenured Carnegie Mellon person. But this attack also sets a troubling precedent. Civil liberties are under attack if law enforcement believes it can circumvent the rules of evidence by outsourcing police work to universities. If academia uses research as a stalking horse for privacy invasion, the entire enterprise of security research will fall into disrepute. Legitimate privacy researchers study many online systems, including social networks. If this kind of FBI attack by a university proxy is accepted, no one will have meaningful Fourth Amendment protections online, and everyone is at risk. Now, I might argue that you already don't have meaningful Fourth Amendment protections online, and everyone already is at risk, but I'm a little bit more of a doomsday prophesier than perhaps some other people might be. But no, it leads to a complicated situation because I want to believe this guy, Dingledine at Carnegie Mellon. I don't think that if something like this is happening, I don't think he's privy to it, but it makes me cautious about different security institutions like Carnegie Mellon because it makes you wonder now, if it's Carnegie Mellon, could it be someone else or some other institution? You know, what other institution might the FBI be paying off? Also, keep in mind that any money the FBI gets, it's getting from us. If the FBI is paying off somebody to do something, it's getting that information and it's getting that money from taxpayers or from tariffs or what have you. In some form or another, it's coming from some citizen somewhere. That money is not just generated out of nowhere, although it technically kind of is to begin with, but we'll pretend it's not. That money doesn't just appear in the FBI bank accounts. It has to be gathered from somewhere. I mean, yeah, the Federal Reserve makes it magically appear, but first it has to go through a few different sources. It's got to be laundered before the government can collect. So it makes you wonder, why? What else are we paying for, right? I mean, what other invasions of privacy are we paying for that we don't even know about, potentially? And this only came out because of some investigative journalism. And really, it's not like we're going to learn about this from some official source. A lot of the time, it seems like we learn about different terrible things the government does because of leaks. Think about Edward Snowden, all the different things that were released because of Edward Snowden, which would have gone completely under the radar had there not been any leaks. We need more people like Edward Snowden. And as much as that probably hurts Director of the FBI, James Comey, for me to say, we really do need more people like Edward Snowden to come out with more information about what the government might or might not be doing to us. This is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio. We're going to talk about military emails coming up in a few minutes right here. Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of my...
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Soddy Daisy, just north of the Bi-Lobe. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Soddy Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Soddy Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Soddy, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. My guest this week has been dispensing financial advice for over 2 decades. Suze Orman will be here to explain why so many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and what we can do about growing personal debt. Don't miss Suze Orman this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report, right here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
President Obama makes Jimmy Carter look like Napoleon Bonaparte. We have a president that leads from behind, and when America doesn't lead, bad things happen.
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. The Commander-in-Chief presenting the Medal of Honor to Florent Groberg, who risked his life to save others in Afghanistan when he tried to stop a suicide bomber.
By pushing the bomber away from the formation, the explosion occurred farther from our forces and on the ground instead of in the open air.
He suffered a severe leg injury and underwent 33 surgeries to save it. Kurdish forces now said to be in control of a key highway in Iraq that serves as an active supply line for ISIS.
The Pentagon also announced that U.S. advisors were present, but that they were well back from the fighting. Sinjar was captured by ISIS last August, and it's strategically important because it sits on Highway 47, which links ISIS's 2 main cities of Mosul in Iraq and Raqqa in Syria.
Fox's Benjamin Hall and Volkswagen offering amnesty to some employees, telling them they can come forward with information about the company's emission cheating scandal. Fox News, we report.
News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
If you're watching on YouTube, you saw me burst out of the room and freak out because I forgot to bring an important volume, which I need for the running of this show. That volume, of course, happens to be the Autumn 2015 edition, Volume 32, Number 3 of 2600, The Hacker Quarterly, which I'm holding up for you now on the webcam. And I was telling different people when I saw it, I said, you know things are getting bad when Donald Trump is on the cover of 2600, The Hacker Quarterly, because, like, what's he doing on there, man? Like, Donald Trump, you're not a hacker. Why are you on 2600? Well, 2600 is a really good magazine. They also put out a pretty good radio show on a radio station. It's actually a public radio station, so I won't rep them. But it's a radio station up in New York, and they do a really good job, I think. But the editor-in-chief of 2600 is Emmanuel Goldstein, taking his name from the main antagonist of 1984, the George Orwell book. I've always had trouble saying his name. But one section that I thought was kind of interesting, well, one interesting section in particular that I thought you might like on the air is the Ashley Madison military sites, which I thought was kind of funny. So we extracted, he says, all of the .mil domains, which were listed in the recently leaked Ashley Madison files. None of these are verified, since anyone could have entered any info without verification. But there are likely many valid military domains revealed here, so much for secrecy, they say. Now, keep in mind that the reason for releasing these emails are not to shame anyone who's on them or anything like that, but these are all .mil addresses, and some of them are very unique. You know, these are actual names, right? Actual people on these .mil addresses. And I'm sure some of them are legit, but, you know, we don't know that. These are all alleged. But I want you to, if you're on the webcam, I want you to take a look at this extensive list. Look how long it goes. It looks like a phone book, doesn't it? And when you're looking at this list, it's 5 columns, and they're very long columns. The print is tiny, and I have good eyes. I've got 2015 vision, and it's hard for me to read some of this stuff, and it's really small. There's page 2, all these different names. This exemplifies how important it is to have cybersecurity. Ashley Madison didn't really. I mean, it may as well not have. Ashley Madison, in case you're not familiar, was widely touted as a cheating website. Widely touted as a cheating website, which you could use for cheating on your spouse or significant other, I think is what they like to say nowadays. Your life partner, I guess. I don't know. And it was a website you could use to be less than fidelity, have less than a lot of fidelity. I don't know what the proper phraseology for that is. Actually, I should have gone to college, but no, it's bad stuff is what it is. It's nasty stuff, and I would say it's immoral stuff. And it's just exemplifies, though, that there are people on here now who may not have ever actually used Ashley Madison, and yet these people's names are now in this particular volume of 2600. Now, I'm not blaming the guys at 2600 saying, how dare you publish this? No, because I know the guys at 2600 published this for a reason. They published it just to show exactly my point here, which is we need cybersecurity. 2600 is all about cybersecurity, although you might argue that 2600 in and of itself does not have a unified goal because it's a publication run by a few people, some staff, but most of their articles are written by regular Joes or people with some interesting insight. It's all listener, too much in radio. It's all viewer or reader supported, I guess it would be the way to put it. Subscriptions are, I would say, kind of pricey just because I don't have a whole lot of money. Each volume is how much? $6.95 US. And for some reason in Canada, everything's more expensive. It's $8.95 in Canada. Canada has probably, I guess Canada has a really weak currency because every book is more expensive in Canada. Go figure. But no, this list goes on forever of all these different military names. It seems like it just goes on and on and on. And I kind of got curious and I looked in here and I see if there's anybody I know in here. And no, I mean, I wasn't in the military personally, so I don't see anybody in here who I know. Funnily enough, there actually is on here McCain.Navy.mil, which I thought was kind of funny. Now, granted, there are tons of people named McCain. There are lots of people named McCain. It's a very common surname, but it still is kind of funny to see that in that list of different names on that particular document. So this is all extracted from the Ashley Madison archives, which are very long archives, by the way. Basically the entire email dump of Ashley Madison took up quite a lot of room on my hard drive. It was a few hundred megabytes or 100 gigabytes. I'm pretty sure it was huge amounts of data that came out of that. And gosh, I'm glad that whole debacle is somewhat over now. And I've heard before that there were, divorces because of it. I know there were lawsuits against Ashley Madison because of it. And it's funny because Ashley Madison actually was a sponsor of a pretty major satellite radio show. And I wonder what's going to come out of that one. But that was an interesting debacle, to say the least. Now, if you're into military stuff, which I kind of am, I'm passively into military stuff. Like, I read about it, and I'm not like, again, I'm not a veteran. I never went to the military. I didn't think it was for me, and it wasn't. I'm glad I didn't go. It would not have been for me at all. Too organized, too regimented, literally regimented, and not my lifestyle, right? Because I'm so loose, I'm so sloppy, I would never be able to make it anywhere in military. I would just be kicked out immediately, and I'd probably be sleeping half the time, and it would just be terrible. But I do happen to know that I really like the A-10, the plane. I think it's really, really a good plane, actually. It's a plane that was built around, it's a jet plane, built around a gun. It's built to be anti-tank, actually. And last week, the Joint Commander in charge of the operations against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria reported that the Syrian Arab coalition fighters have beaten back the group, taking the town of Al-Hol and 250 square kilometers of territory around it, and an offensive supported from the air by the Air Force's A-10s and AC-130s flying from a Turkish airbase. Now, the A-10 is supposed to be phased out in favor of the F-35, which I don't like the F-35. It tries too much to be everything. And it seems like if you specialize in everything, you'll just be mediocre at them all. But I don't know. I just don't like the F-35. It seems too specialized in everything. And it seems like we need something like the A-10, because the A-10 is proven. It just works. The F-35 has problems. I've read before that MiG-29s can beat the F-35. Not a good sign. I've read before that the F-16 can beat the F-35 at a dogfight, even with the F-35 not having any missiles in its loadout, all sorts of different things. It's just, I don't like the F-35. Now, I could be completely wrong about all of that. The F-35 could be the best plane ever, but I still personally do not like the F-35 because I'm stingy about military planes. I'm very stingy about these sorts of things. Like, I don't like digital camo either. I could go on. Oh man, Keon can tell you. I can go on about digital camo. I don't think it looks good. There's no justification for it. I think it looks terrible. Fashion-wise, it's not very FA at all. It just looks bad. And digital camo. Fortunately, I think the Marines are moving over to Marpat, and I think that looks a lot better. And Navy's always stuck with pretty decent camo, much more blue, and I kind of like the blue shade of that. But I don't know. I just don't like digital camo. I'm sorry. I thought that Woodland looked better than that even. I thought that the whatever they were using during Desert Storm looked better than that. I thought Pasgat was much more interesting looking than what we're using today. But I can go on about that anyway. According to a Defense One report, U.S. Air Combat Command Chief General Herbert Hawk Carlisle said at a Defense Writers Group breakfast this morning that the Air Force would probably move the retirement slightly to the right because of the greater demands being placed on the U.S. Air Force's operational capacity in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. Eventually, we will have to get there. We will have to retire airplanes, Carlisle added, but I think moving it to the right and starting a bit later and maybe keeping the airplane around a bit longer is something that's being considered based on things as they are today and what we see them in the future. The Air Force has pushed Congress to retire the A-10 over the past 2 years as budget sequestration strained the service's ability to continue to pay for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. Air Force leaders say that they need to free maintenance crews to train on servicing and supporting the F-35 as well, which may end up being one of the bigger mistakes our Air Force has made. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Fortunately, we're not really engaged in a whole lot of air combat these days, which is nice, but how long is that going to last? That's the thing. I mean, we always talk about how we prepare for the last war, and I don't think that that's actually possibly true in what we're doing in a lot of regards with military today. It seems like we're preparing for Cold War, which never really got that hot. Now, there were confrontations. Vietnam, obviously, was very major NATO versus Soviet conflict. Korea as well. But really, we're preparing more for Cold War than we are for counterinsurgency. It seems like we're preparing much more for wide-scale, broad combat than we are for what we're used to now, which would be counterinsurgency. But, well, that's a topic for another day, perhaps. But it seems like the F-35, if it's true that the MiG-29s can beat them, that's kind of a problem. I mean, MiG-29s are not exactly hard to find, and if it's true that the F-35 can be beaten with one, that makes it very cost-effective actually to beat an F-35, because the F-35 is a highly expensive piece of equipment. But we'll have to see how that one plays out. Heaven forbid there be a broad-scale combat or conflict, because that would not be a good thing, and I don't think anyone is hoping for that except for the folks over at Boeing and Colt, maybe be hoping for broad combat. But whatever. Hey, if you've got an iPhone, be glad, because now you can have Firefox on your iPhone. Now, some people really like Safari, and I will admit I haven't used Safari since the mid-2000s, so I'm a little bit behind on the whole Safari game, but I do use Firefox on my Android phone, and I like it a lot. I tried a bunch of different mobile browsers. I tried Chrome, and I mean, I don't dislike Chrome. I just like Firefox, I guess, mostly because I use Firefox on my computers at home. So I like the tab sharing feature. So I can just right click and, send tab to my phone. And I think that's a really cool feature. And I can do the opposite, vice versa, from my phone to my computer. I think that's really cool stuff. And I wish that Chrome had that ability. Maybe it does now. I haven't tried Chrome in forever. I should probably give it another shot. But I just like Firefox. And it's funny because Firefox actually has a lot of downsides. We're talking about the mobile browser game or even the desktop browser game. Firefox has some downsides, especially if you're running it on Linux like I do. Chrome on Windows and Mac is honestly the better platform if you want compatibility. But if you want customizability, Firefox. If you want open source, Firefox. If you don't care about open source, go for Google Chrome. If you don't mind a botnet, go for Chrome. See, my big beef with Chrome is perhaps a minor beef, but I like to think it's big. Chrome is run by Google. I like Google. I really do. I use an Android phone. I think Google's great. I think that Android phones are great. I don't like iPhones. I think Android phones are great. And I think Google's a good company for the most part. But the thing is, Google is an ad company. And we've gone over this a few times, but Google is an ad company. And that being the case, Google is big into capturing your info. Now, we know that when we use a Google device, we kind of understand. We agree to the terms and conditions. We know that this happens. But that doesn't stop it from making me a little bit uncomfortable when I'm using Chrome to browse different websites. Now, I don't really do anything bad on the net. I really don't. But I wouldn't have a problem with like my mom over my shoulder with like all of my web browsing. That wouldn't bother me. But for some reason, it just skeeves me out when there's a corporation that's looking at all the stuff I'm browsing. That just kind of makes me weirded out. I mean, we know as well that Facebook has cookies that will watch what you do when you're browsing as well. And that, again, that makes me kind of uncomfortable. I don't really like that, to be quite frank with you. And so I try to avoid the Google botnet as much as I can. Maybe perhaps I'm optimistic and thinking that it's okay, but I don't know. Hey, caller, you're on the air. What's up?
Why don't you like iPhone? Because it works?
Yeah, I don't like the functionality. No, I just can't get into it's not for me.
I've had so many Androids. And the reason why I never went with iPhone, the primary reason was they were all so tiny. The 4s and the 5s. And if you remember, Jobs made fun of the Note, the Galaxy Note, because it was so big.
Yeah.
The ones I always had were the big Notes. And now the iPhone 6 Plus comes out, that looks almost exactly like the Note, which now I have, which the operating system blows away any Android system. It just works all the time, doesn't lock up, and doesn't fail. But I do use Google, though. Like, I'll still ask Google questions, and for directions, always use Google. I think it's better than Siri. However, the operating system to multitask and to use other functions that require the internet, there's no comparison. The Android phones, they don't live up to the iPhone operating system.
Well, I'll counter that by saying I really hated the Note too. Because I used one for a long time and I thought it was really bad. And really, the only Android phone that I've really liked so far is my Moto G. And I mean, I'm not obviously I'm shilling for Motorola or anything, but I honestly, I think it's a really good experience. And I've compared it to the iPhone. I've used other people's iPhones, and I really do prefer Android 5 point whatever it is now over iOS.
I'll tell you what, kudos to the Moto G, which I actually had. I had the Moto, which was a great phone.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, if you're going to get, well, look at Motorola. I mean, Motorola's been around forever. But if you're going to get an Android phone, I'm with you. I would say the Moto.
Yeah, and plus it's more cost effective because if you're like me and you don't have a plan, right? Like I'm not on a contract or anything. It's a lot more cost effective to get an Android phone than it is an iPhone, unless you're going to get a used like 5C, which you can do. And you know, I'm not like other guys where I'll say like, "How dare you buy an iPhone?" If it works for you, it works for you, and that's totally fine with me. You know, like whatever works for your business application is fine.
I can tell you this in using Android for many years, and now using the iPhone system. There really is no comparison. The iPhone just doesn't fail. And I wanted it to fail. I bought it to bring it back in their face in a week and tell them it sucks and it was going to fail. And I ended up being wrong. So, I mean, I tested both of them. So, you know, all I can tell you is that being objective on it, I'm going to have to vote for the iPhone. All right, thanks.
All right, no problem. Yeah, well, you can call in, by the way. The number is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 if you want to call into Hot News Talk Radio. Of course, we all know what the superior operating system is for mobile phones. It's Symbian. That would be the best one. Or perhaps BlackBerry's operating system would be the best one ever. Maybe. I don't know. Nokia was noted for having the There's a whole big story you could have about Nokia's phones, by the way. Nokia had Symbian for a long time, and it kind of, I mean, it worked out great because Nokia started the smartphone thing, by the way, like way before Apple did. Nokia had smartphones, and Nokia's smartphones were really good. They were really, really good. The problem was Nokia was pumping out phones almost too quickly. They had kind of sort of the problem that Apple has, but not quite, in that Apple at least has a schedule where you can look at Apple and say, okay, this phone's coming out, this phone's coming out. We know the iPhone 7 is going to be coming out next year, most likely. We can look at that and we can discern that. But when it comes to, or actually the iPhone 6S might be coming out next year, I don't know. But it's with Android or with Nokia, it was like every other day a new Nokia phone was coming out and you were already outdated. I'm not sure if that's Nokia's fault as much as it is just a sign of the times. Because think about the 90s, where when computers were coming out in the 90s, it was just like as soon as you bought it, you were outdated. Since 2004, we haven't really had that problem too much because we've hit a stagnation point with clock speeds actually on processors since about 2004, 2005. We're kind of stuck at like 3.2 gigahertz per core, or 3.6. Really 4 is as high as you're going to see on a baseline processor. And they just increased the cores. And now they're going to be increasing processors, like 2 processors now. Clock speed's not changing, really, and probably won't be until we get away from silicon. But anyway, yeah, back in the 90s, when you bought a phone, it was like a computer. Like the next day, you were totally behind. Because think about 1993. It's like you've got 5 megs of RAM, you have an i3-86, and then the next day, the i4-86 comes out and everyone suddenly has, 16 megabytes of RAM, and they've doubled suddenly, and you're just like, you've been left behind. And the manufacturers knew that was kind of a problem, so they came out with like different patch kits. You could get the MX sets for i4-86, and you could upgrade them to be Pentium-like when the Pentiums came out. And oh man, the home computer market when it came to speed was such a mess, because especially with older people who, when older people bought things back then, and I don't think this is the case anymore, but when older people bought things back then, it was like an appliance. You kind of just expected it to work until it wore out. Obsolescence wasn't like a thing. You know what I mean? I think about the older generation, where it was like you bought a washing machine and you had that washing machine until the thing stopped working. And you bought a car and you had the car until the thing stopped working. And so on and so forth. You bought a house until it burned down. You're like my grandparents. So it's like that was how it worked. And then computers, a whole new field. Computers, you had a lot of older people who were saying like, well, I've got this computer. Why do I need to buy a new one? I've already got one and it still works. And it's hard to explain, like, no, listen, you need a new one because the old one isn't going to work. Like, what are you talking about? I can still email with it. I can still do this and this and that. It's like, yeah, but I mean, next year you're not going to be able to do this or that, and it's not going to work out for you. And it's hard to explain that to the older generation who didn't grow up with computers like we did. Like, I understand obsolescence, and that's not because I'm special. That's just because I grew up when I did, and I'm still growing up, honestly. But when I was alive, we knew that our computers were going to be outdated and we had to buy new ones. And we knew that our cell phones were going to be outdated and we needed to buy new ones. And TVs and everything else was going to be outdated and we needed to buy a new one. It's just disposable generation, basically. We knew that that was the case. My dad was telling me about his mother, or his grandmother, pardon me, who even in the 60s still had this old dryer that squeezed clothes in the 60s. And they had washing machines. You had to set them in the river, you know, in the 60s in Louisiana. Now, granted, it was Louisiana, so that's to be expected. But still, I mean, that mindset was so prevalent, and it continued into the 90s where you had people buying computers and saying, oh, it's never going to be outdated, right? I mean, I just bought the thing. It's the latest thing. And then the next day, i46 comes out, Pentium comes out and shatters the industry. The Pentium 4 house fires come out, and it's just, it was a mess. So we need to get privy to the idea that when a new smartphone comes out, the old one's going to be outdated. And I think that that actually is part of what's hurting Android in a lot of different ways, is we have people who bought the Note and said, I don't like Android on the Note. It's just terrible. Look at the iPhone. It's good. Well, yeah, it is for now. And plus, Android moves so quickly. The iPhones, you can use an iPhone 4 and still be fine, really, today. You can still use an iPhone 5C and still be fine. You can use an iPhone 5 and still be fine. And now there's the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus. I get that, but you can still be fine with even like an iPhone 3G. You can still do a lot of the stuff on those phones so long as you're updated to iOS 7. As long as your phone runs iOS 7, you can pretty much run anything. And that's one of the plus sides about Macs or about iPhones and Apple products in general, is that even the older ones tend to stay up to date to some degree. iPhones, or rather Android phones, on the other hand, they tend to be a lot more disposable. And I get that. So like the Note from Samsung back in the day, I don't think the Note was very good when it came out, and I really don't think the Note is very good now either. And honestly, I would have to say Motorola is your better choice for cost-effective phones. If you want top of the line, go Nexus. But and again, I'm not being paid by Motorola to say this, or Lenovo, which owns Motorola, to say this. But I really do think that Motorola comes out with the best Android phones for cost-effectiveness. I really believe that. There are other options. You know, other Chinese companies, I should say, come out with really good phones. But I don't know, man. It's weird. The smartphone market is a really weird industry, and it's a lot like personal computers were in the 90s. I think there are a lot of parallels there between the home computer market in the 90s and the smartphone market today. And hopefully it'll even out. Eventually we'll sort of hit a stagnation point where we can just buy phones and I can have a phone from 2025 that'll work in 2030. But that day is probably a long way away. Clutch with Keon Rose is coming up next, or he's going to sneeze his way in here and talk about sports and other sports-related topics, maybe a little bit more about Missouri. Yes, Missouri, where all that controversy is going on, here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and he's always here on hotnewstalkradio.com as well. Don't forget that you can watch Keon's classic episodes and my classic episodes on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and then search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you can see us streaming live there. Or you can watch all of our recorded episodes on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Be sure to listen to Hot News Live at 5 tonight at 5 here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240.
This is a mob world. This is the mob world.